You're fired. Lily, pack your desk and get out before I call security. Richard Hawthorne stood behind his massive oak desk, arms crossed over his expensive suit, a smirk playing at the corner of his mouth. His office on the top floor of Denver International Airport's administration building overlooked the runways, where planes took off every 90 seconds, carrying passengers who had no idea that in this very room, a woman's career was being murdered in broad daylight. Lily stood perfectly still, one hand instinctively moving to her 6-month pregnant belly. The baby kicked, as if sensing her mother's racing heartbeat. She'd known this moment was coming. For weeks she'd felt the shift, noticed the way Richard's eyes lingered on her growing stomach during meetings, the way his jaw tightened whenever she spoke up about the new terminal expansion project. Her project, the one she'd spent 2 years developing from concept to near completion. On what grounds? Lily's voice was steady, controlled. Years of being the only Black woman in executive meetings had taught her to never let them see you break. Performance issues. Richard didn't even bother to make it sound convincing. He slid a single sheet of paper across his desk. It's all documented right here. Lily picked up the paper with trembling fingers, her eyes scanning the fabricated complaints. Missed deadlines. She'd never missed a single one. Poor team management. Her team had the highest satisfaction scores in the entire airport operations division. Unprofessional conduct. That one almost made her laugh if the situation wasn't so devastating. This is completely false and you know it. Do I? Richard leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled under his chin like some kind of corporate villain from a movie. Because what I know, Lily, is that you've been a liability since the day I took over as CEO 6 months ago. And now, with your condition, his eyes dropped pointedly to her belly. Well, let's just say this company needs leaders who can actually commit to the job. There it was. The real reason, barely hidden behind corporate speak. My name is Lily Morrison, and I was 29 years old the day my boss destroyed everything I'd built. I'd spent 7 years climbing the ranks at Denver International, starting as a junior operations coordinator right out of college, and working my way up to senior director of terminal development. I was the youngest person and the only Black woman to ever hold that position. I designed the expansion that would add 15 new gates and generate an estimated $200 million in annual revenue. That project was my baby, born from countless sleepless nights, hundreds of presentations, and more spreadsheets than I care to remember. But none of that mattered now, because 6 months ago, when Richard Hawthorne bought controlling shares in the airport's private management consortium and installed himself as CEO. Controlled himself as CEO. He'd made his priorities crystal clear. And a pregnant Black woman in a leadership position wasn't part of his vision. I have rights, Richard. You can't I? He stood up, buttoning his jacket with the casual arrogance of someone who'd never faced real consequences for anything in his privileged life. Check your contract, Lily. Colorado is an at-will state. I can terminate anyone, anytime for any reason. And before you even think about crying discrimination, I'd remind you that I have 14 witnesses who'll testify to your performance problems. Lily's mind flashed to the executive team meeting 3 weeks ago, where she'd presented the final phase of the terminal expansion. Richard had interrupted her presentation 4 times, questioned her budget calculations even though they'd been verified by 3 independent auditors, and finally dismissed her proposal entirely, saying they needed fresh perspectives. The all-white, all-male executive team had nodded along like trained seals. Not one of them had spoken up for her. She'd known then that something was wrong. Should have trusted her instincts. The terminal expansion will be completed by someone more suited to the task? Richard's smile widened. In fact, I've already offered the project to David Chen. He starts in your position on Monday. David Chen, the man who'd been her assistant director for the past 1.5 years. The man she'd mentored, trained, brought to every high-level meeting to help advance his career. The man who'd sat in her office just last week, listening to her excitedly discuss baby names, nodding sympathetically when she worried about balancing motherhood and her demanding job. That betrayal stung almost as much as the firing itself. You planned this. Lily's voice was barely a whisper now. You've been planning this for months. I plan to save this airport from mediocrity. Richard walked around his desk, standing uncomfortably close to her. Close enough that she could smell his expensive cologne, see the cold calculation in his pale blue eyes. And let me give you some free advice, Lily. Maybe instead of trying to play in the big leagues, you should focus on what you're actually good at. Go home. Have your baby. Find a nice little job somewhere that doesn't require real leadership. Because here's the truth nobody wants to say out loud. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a stage whisper dripping with venom. Black women don't belong in leadership positions. You don't have what it takes. You never did. And deep down you know I'm right. The words hung in the air like poison gas. Lily felt her baby kick again, stronger this time. As if her unborn daughter was saying, don't you dare let him win. But what could she do? She had $47,000 in student loans, a mortgage on a small condo, and a baby coming in 3 months. Her savings would cover maybe 2 months of expenses if she was careful. She needed this job. She needed the health insurance. She needed. Security will escort you out. Richard pressed a button on his desk phone. I'm having your access credentials deactivated as we speak. You have 15 minutes to clear your personal items from your office. Anything left behind will be disposed of. 2 security guards appeared at the door. Lily recognized them both. Carl and Marcus. Men she'd worked with for years. Men who'd always greeted her warmly in the hallways. Now they wouldn't meet her eyes. Gentlemen, please escort Miss Morrison to her office and then off the premises. Lily wanted to scream. Wanted to flip his desk, throw his awards through his window, make him feel even a fraction of the humiliation burning through her chest. But she didn't, because that's exactly what he expected. That's what they always expected from women like her. To be emotional, irrational, to prove every stereotype they'd ever believed. Instead, she straightened her spine, placed both hands protectively on her belly, and looked Richard Hawthorne directly in his smug face. You just made the biggest mistake of your life. Her voice was calm. Too calm. Something in her tone made Richard's smile falter for just a second. Is that a threat, Lily? No, Richard. It's a promise. She turned and walked out, heels clicking on the marble floor. Security guards trailing behind her like she was some kind of criminal. Employees peeked out of their offices, whispers following her down the hallway. That's Lily Morrison. I heard she got fired. I heard she messed up the terminal project. I heard she was always difficult to work with. The lies would spread like wildfire. By tomorrow, her reputation would be destroyed. But as Lily packed her 7 years into a single cardboard box, her nameplate, her coffee mug that said, nevertheless, she persisted, the photo of her late mother who'd worked 3 jobs to put Lily through college, she felt something unexpected growing inside her, right alongside her daughter. Not despair. Not even anger anymore. Something colder. Something sharper. Something that whispered, he thinks he's won. Let him think that. Let him get comfortable. Because Lily Morrison had spent her entire life being underestimated. And she was done proving herself to people who'd already decided she wasn't worth their respect. It was time to build something new. Something they could never take away. Something that would make Richard Hawthorne regret every word he just said. She just didn't know yet that in exactly 2 years, she'd own the very building she was being escorted out of. That Richard would stand in front of her, tears streaming down his face, begging for mercy. And that she would show him exactly as much mercy as he'd shown her on this day. If you're feeling that fire in your chest right now, that need to see justice served, hit that subscribe button. Because what happens next is going to blow your mind. The eviction notice arrived on a Tuesday, taped to Lily's apartment door like a scarlet letter for the whole hallway to see. She ripped it down quickly, glancing around to see if any neighbors had witnessed her humiliation. Mrs. Chun from 3B pretended to check her mailbox, but Lily caught the pitying look. Everyone in the building knew she'd been fired. Everyone knew she was pregnant and alone. Everyone probably wondered how she'd let herself fall so far. 60 days to vacate or face legal action. Lily crumpled the notice in her fist and unlocked her door, stepping into the tiny 1-bedroom condo that suddenly felt like a prison cell. It had been 3 weeks since Richard fired her. 3 weeks of watching her savings account drain like water through a sieve. 3 weeks of sending out resumes and getting nothing but automated rejection emails. She dropped onto her second-hand couch and pulled out her laptop, opening her email for the 100th time that day. 23 new messages. Her heart jumped with hope until she started reading. Thank you for your interest in the operations manager position at Southwest Airlines. Unfortunately, we've decided to move forward with other candidates. After careful consideration, we don't feel you're the right fit for our organization at this time. We've filled the position with a more qualified candidate. More qualified. The words made her laugh bitterly. She'd built a terminal expansion from scratch, managed budgets in the hundreds of millions, led teams of 50-plus employees. But apparently, that wasn't enough when you were a pregnant black woman with a performance problem termination on your record, because Richard had been thorough. Whatever he'd put in her file, whatever lies he'd told the industry network, her name was poison now. She'd called former colleagues, people she'd considered friends, and heard the hesitation in their voices, the carefully worded excuses, the sudden unavailability. David Chun hadn't even had the decency to avoid her calls. He'd answered on the second ring, his voice dripping with false sympathy. Lily, I'm so sorry about what happened. If there's anything I can do... You took my job, David. My project. Everything I built. A pause. Then his voice had changed. Gone cold. You were going to lose it anyway. Richard was going to scrap the whole terminal expansion if someone didn't step in. I'm actually saving your legacy. My legacy? The project will still get built. Isn't that what matters? And honestly, Lily, he'd sighed like he was about to share some uncomfortable truth for her own good. Maybe this is a blessing in disguise. You were always trying to prove something, always working twice as hard as everyone else. Maybe now you can just relax, be a mom. Isn't that enough? She'd hung up before she said something she'd regret. But his words haunted her. Isn't that enough? As if being a mother was some consolation prize for having your career destroyed. As if she couldn't be both. As if wanting both made her greedy, ungrateful, difficult. Her daughter kicked, a sharp jab under her ribs. Lily placed her hand on her belly, feeling the tiny movements that were becoming stronger every day. I'm going to give you everything, baby girl, she whispered. Even if I have to build it from nothing. But how? Her unemployment claim had been denied because Richard had documented her termination as for cause. Her health insurance was running out in 2 weeks. The baby was due in 10 weeks. She'd applied for Medicaid, swallowing her pride, filling out forms in a sterile government office while a board clerk asked invasive questions about her finances. How did you become unemployed? I was fired for being pregnant and black, but my boss was smart enough not to say it that way. She hadn't actually said that, of course. She'd given the sanitized version, and the clerk had stamped her forms without even looking up. Lily's phone buzzed. A news alert from the Denver Business Journal. Despite herself, she opened it. Denver International Airport announces major terminal expansion. $200 million project set to break ground this fall. There was a photo of Richard Hawthorne shaking hands with the mayor. Both men grinning like they'd accomplished something remarkable. And there, standing slightly behind Richard, was David Chun, holding up architectural plans, her plans. The designs she'd spent 2 years developing. The article quoted Richard extensively. This expansion represents the future of Denver International. Under my leadership, we've brought fresh vision and bold innovation to this airport. I'm proud to announce that our new Director of Terminal Development, David Chen, will be spearheading this historic project. Fresh vision. Bold innovation. Not a single mention of Lily Morrison, the woman who'd actually conceived, designed, and fought for every inch of that project. They'd erased her. Completely. Lily felt something crack inside her chest, but it wasn't her spirit breaking. It was something else. Something harder than grief. Sharper than anger. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory. Words from childhood when Lily had come home crying, because the kids at school said she didn't belong in the gifted program. Baby girl, they're going to try to make you small your whole life. They're going to try to convince you that your dreams are too big, that you're reaching too high, that you should be grateful for whatever scraps they throw you. Don't you ever believe them. You build your own table, you hear me? Build it so strong they can't knock it down. Lily opened her laptop and started a new document. Not a resume this time. Something different. She began researching Richard Hawthorne. Not just his professional history, but everything. His education, his business deals, his investors, his financial backing. The consortium that owned Denver International's management contract. The shareholders, the board members. She researched David Chen. His credentials, which were impressive but not nearly as extensive as hers. His previous projects, which were solid but unspectacular. His connections, which apparently included a college roommate on Denver International's board of directors. Of course. It always came down to connections. Lily dug deeper. She found the original proposal she'd submitted for the terminal expansion, the one she'd copyrighted and filed with the City Planning Commission 2 years ago. She downloaded every document, every email, every presentation she'd ever created for Denver International. They deactivated her work email, but she'd been smart enough to back up everything to her personal cloud storage. 7 years of work. 7 years of projects, budgets, strategic plans, operational improvements. All documented, all timestamped, all bearing her name. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Ms. Morrison? This is Jessica Park from the Colorado Department of Labor. I'm calling about your unemployment claim denial. Lily's heart sank. More bad news. I've reviewed your case, Jessica continued. And frankly, the documentation your former employer submitted doesn't hold up under scrutiny. The performance issues they cited don't match your actual performance reviews, which I was able to access through the state workforce database. Your reviews were exemplary for 7 consecutive years, and then suddenly, 6 months ago, they plummet? That raises red flags for potential discrimination. Lily sat up straighter. What does that mean? It means I'm overturning the denial. You'll receive unemployment benefits retroactively. But Miss Morrison, I'd strongly suggest you contact an employment attorney. This case has all the hallmarks of pregnancy discrimination and possibly racial discrimination as well. After they hung up, Lily sat in stunned silence. It was the first piece of good news she'd received in weeks. Not enough to solve her problems, but enough to buy her time. She called 3 employment lawyers that afternoon. The first 2 listened politely and then explained that discrimination cases were difficult to prove, expensive to litigate, and rarely worth the emotional toll. The third lawyer, a woman named Patricia Rodriguez, said something different. I'll be honest with you, Lily. We could sue and probably win a settlement, but it would take 2 to 3 years, cost you your mental health, and at the end of it, you'd get maybe 6 months' salary and a confidentiality agreement that prevents you from ever talking about what happened. Richard Hawthorne would pay the settlement out of petty cash and never think about you again. So, what do I do? Lily heard the desperation in her own voice. You want my real advice? The advice that has nothing to do with legal strategy? Yes. Become so successful that they can't ignore you. Build something so big that when they see your name, they remember what they lost. That's the revenge that actually feels good. Patricia's words echoed in Lily's mind for days. Build something so big. But build what? With what resources? She had $3,847 in her bank account, a baby due in 9 weeks, and a resume that apparently nobody wanted to touch. The baby came early, on a cold November morning 8 weeks later. Lily's water broke while she was sitting in a waiting room at the wake office, trying to qualify for formula assistance. She took an Uber to the hospital because she couldn't afford an ambulance. Her overnight bag clutched to her chest as contractions ripped through her body. She labored alone for 14 hours. No partner, no family. Her mother had died of cancer 3 years ago, and Lily had no siblings. Just her and the nurses who were kind but busy with other patients. When her daughter finally emerged, screaming and perfect, the nurse placed her on Lily's chest and said, "What's her name?" Lily looked down at her daughter's tiny face, her dark eyes already open and alert, and felt something shift inside her. This little girl would never see her mother broken. Would never see her mother accept defeat. "Maya?" Lily whispered. "Her name is Maya. It means illusion in Sanskrit. Because people are going to underestimate us, baby girl. They're going to think we're weak. But we're going to show them it was all an illusion. The hospital bill came to $27,000 after insurance. Lily stared at it and laughed until she cried. Then she called the billing department and set up a payment plan of $50 a month. It would take her 45 years to pay it off at that rate, but at least they couldn't repo her baby. She returned to her apartment with Maya 5 days later to find another notice on her door. This time, not an eviction threat. A foreclosure warning. She'd missed 3 mortgage payments. Lily sat on her couch, her newborn daughter sleeping in a bassinet beside her, and pulled out her laptop one more time. She opened a blank document and stared at the cursor blinking on the empty page. Build something so big they can't ignore you. Her fingers started typing. Morrison Consulting Group, Strategic Airport Operations and Development. She had no office, no employees, no clients, no capital, just 7 years of expertise, a laptop, and rage that burned hotter than any fear. Lily began cold emailing every small regional airport in Colorado, offering free consultations. She designed a website using a free template, wrote articles about airport operations and posted them on LinkedIn, slowly building credibility. The first client came 4 months later. A tiny municipal airport in Grand Junction that needed help optimizing their gate scheduling. They paid her $2,000 for 2 weeks of work. It wasn't much, but it was a start. And while Lily was taking calls with Maya strapped to her chest in a baby carrier, while she was surviving on 4 hours of sleep and ramen noodles, while she was building something from absolute zero, Richard Hawthorne was giving interviews about his visionary leadership at Denver International. He had no idea that the woman he'd thrown away was studying every move he made, learning every weakness in his operation, preparing for something he couldn't even imagine. Because Lily Morrison had discovered something Richard would never understand. When you have nothing left to lose, you become dangerous. 18 months after Maya was born, Lily sat in a coffee shop in Boulder, across from a man who could change everything. Marcus Chen, no relation to David, thankfully was a venture capitalist who specialized in infrastructure and transportation investments. He'd reached out to her after reading one of her LinkedIn articles about optimizing airport revenue through strategic terminal design. The same principles she'd used to develop the Denver International expansion that now bore David Chen's name. Your analysis of the Phoenix Sky Harbor improvements was brilliant, Marcus said, sliding his tablet across the table. You identified inefficiencies their own operations team missed. That's not common. Lily bounced Maya on her knee, trying to keep her 2-year-old entertained with a packet of crackers while maintaining professional composure. She hadn't been able to afford a babysitter for this meeting. Hadn't been able to afford much of anything, really. Her apartment was gone, foreclosed 6 months ago. Now she and Maya lived in a tiny studio above a laundromat, where the constant rumble of industrial dryers lulled her daughter to sleep at night. Thank you, Lily said carefully. I've been studying airport operations for nearly a decade. There's always room for improvement, even in successful facilities. Marcus leaned back, studying her with sharp eyes. I did some research on you after we connected. You used to work at Denver International, Senior Director of Terminal Development. That's an impressive title for someone so young. Here it was. The moment where he'd ask why she left, where she'd have to explain the gap in her employment, where this opportunity would evaporate like every other one. I was terminated, Lily said flatly. No point in sugarcoating it anymore. My CEO decided a pregnant black woman wasn't the right fit for his executive team. She waited for Marcus to make his excuses, to suddenly remember another appointment, to ghost her like so many others had. Instead, he smiled. Richard Hawthorne. I know him. Went to business school with his older brother. The whole family's built on inherited wealth and unearned confidence. He paused. I also know that the terminal expansion project everyone's celebrating as his crowning achievement was actually your design. I pulled the original City Planning Commission filings. Your name is all over them. Lily's heart stuttered. You know that? I know a lot of things. For instance, I know that Morrison Consulting Group has completed 12 projects in the last 18 months. All of them small regional airports. All of them coming in under budget and exceeding performance targets. I know you're operating out of a studio apartment with capital of approximately $0. And that you're doing all of this while raising a toddler alone. He leaned forward. What I want to know is what you do with real resources. What kind of resources? The kind that could turn Morrison Consulting Group into something bigger. Much bigger. Marcus pulled out a folder. I'm prepared to offer you a $2 million investment in exchange for 30% equity in your company. You'd use that capital to hire a team, open a real office, and pursue larger contracts. Within 2 years, I believe we could position you to bid on major airport development projects. The kind that would put you in direct competition with Denver International's current management. The number hit Lily like a physical force. $2 million. More money than she'd ever dreamed of having access to. The kind of money that could change her life, could give Maya stability, could rebuild everything Richard had destroyed. The 30% equity. Giving up a third of her company to someone she'd just met. Maya squirmed in her lap, dropping crackers on the floor. A barista shot them an annoyed look. Lily felt the familiar shame creeping in. The sense that she didn't belong in spaces like this. That she was always one spilled juice box away from being asked to leave. Why me? Lily asked quietly. There are established firms with proven track records. Why invest in someone with no office and no team? Marcus's expression softened. My mother was a Korean immigrant who cleaned offices to put me through school. She was brilliant with numbers, could have been a CPA, but nobody would hire a woman with broken English and no connections. She died never knowing what she could have accomplished with real opportunity. He met Lily's eyes. I invest in people who've been underestimated. They work harder, think sharper, and they never forget where they came from. That's worth more than an MBA from Harvard. Lily thought about her mother, working 3 jobs, coming home exhausted, but always asking about Lily's homework, always pushing her to dream bigger. She thought about Maya, watching her mother struggle, learning whether the world rewarded hard work or just crushed the people who believed in it. I want 49% equity for you, Lily said. I keep 51%. Non-negotiable. This company is mine, and I won't let anyone take it away again. Marcus smiled wider. Deal. When can you start? The transformation happened faster than Lily could have imagined. Within 3 months, Morrison Consulting Group had a real office in downtown Denver, a staff of 8, and 3 major contracts with mid-sized regional airports. Within 6 months, they doubled their revenue and their reputation was spreading throughout the industry. Lily hired carefully. She brought in talent that larger firms overlooked, a brilliant operations analyst who'd been laid off at 55 because he was too expensive. A black woman with a master's in urban planning who'd been passed over for promotion 6 times. A non-binary airport designer who'd faced discrimination at every traditional firm they'd worked for. She built a team of people who had something to prove. Who understood that excellence wasn't optional when the world was waiting for you to fail. And slowly, carefully, Lily began positioning herself for the move that would change everything. She attended industry conferences, networking events, city planning meetings. She made sure Richard Hawthorne saw her name on speaker lists, in trade publications, on winning bid announcements. She wanted him to know she was still here, still in his world. But she didn't approach him. Didn't acknowledge him when they passed each other in hotel lobbies at conferences. Just smiled politely, like he was any other stranger. It drove him crazy. She could see it in the way his eyes followed her across rooms, the way his jaw tightened when people mentioned Morrison Consulting Group's latest success. The first time she saw him after starting her company was at the National Airport Conference in Chicago. Lily was scheduled to give a keynote speech on innovative terminal design. As she walked to the stage, she spotted Richard sitting in the 3rd row, arms crossed, that familiar smirk on his face. She delivered her presentation flawlessly, showcasing efficiency improvements her firm had implemented at 6 different airports. The audience of airport executives and city planners gave her a standing ovation. After the speech, Richard approached her in the hallway. David Chan lurked behind him like a shadow. Well, little Lily Morrison. Richard's voice dripped with condescension. Playing consultant now? That's cute. Running around fixing problems at tiny airports nobody's ever heard of. Lily adjusted the strap of Maya's diaper bag on her. shoulder. She'd brought her daughter to the conference because childcare cost $200 a day and smiled pleasantly. Richard, how's the terminal expansion going? Better than you ever could have managed. He stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. You think anyone takes you seriously? You think this little consulting game you're playing matters? You're still the same affirmative action hire who couldn't cut it in the real leagues. David snickered behind him, and Lily felt a familiar rage building. But she'd learned control in the past 2 years. Learned that the best revenge wasn't screaming, wasn't making a scene. It was succeeding so completely that your enemies choked on their own arrogance. You're absolutely right, Richard, Lily said sweetly. I could never manage something as big as Denver International. That requires, what do you call it? Real leadership. She paused, watching his smirk widen. Enjoy your conference. She walked away, leaving him satisfied that he'd put her in her place. David high-fived Richard like they'd accomplished something meaningful. They had no idea that Lily had just spent the last hour networking with 4 members of Denver International's board of directors. The same board that was growing increasingly concerned about Richard's management style, his budget overruns, and his inability to meet the promised completion timeline for the terminal expansion. Her terminal expansion. The project was 6 months behind schedule and $40 million over budget. Richard had cut corners, ignored key structural requirements, and made design changes that compromised the entire foundation. The board was losing confidence. And Lily had made sure they knew that Morrison Consulting Group specialized in rescuing troubled airport development projects. Back at her office 3 days later, Lily received an email that made her pulse race. Subject: Confidential consultation request, Denver International Airport. Miss Morrison, several members of our board of directors have recommended your firm for a confidential assessment of our current terminal expansion project. We're experiencing challenges and would appreciate an expert third-party evaluation. Would you be available for a preliminary meeting next week? This inquiry is strictly confidential and should not be disclosed to our current management. Regards, Patricia Walsh, Board Chair, Denver International Airport. Lily read the email 3 times, her hands shaking. This was it, the door opening. The chance she'd been building toward for 2 years. She called Marcus immediately. They want me to audit Richard's project, she said, barely able to keep the excitement out of her voice. The board is going around him to investigate why everything's falling apart. What are you going to find? Marcus asked. Lily pulled up the files she'd been quietly collecting for months. Building permits that didn't match submitted plans. Safety inspections that had been rushed or skipped entirely. Budget reports that didn't align with actual expenditures. She'd been monitoring the project obsessively, watching Richard make mistake after mistake, watching David Chen prove he was as incompetent as she'd always suspected. I'm going to find that Richard Hawthorne has no idea what he's doing, Lily said, and that the $200 million project he stole from me is on track to become a $300 million disaster. And then? Lily looked at Maya, playing with blocks in the corner of her office, and remembered the day Richard had sneered at her pregnant belly and told her she didn't belong in leadership. Remembered standing in that foreclosed apartment with nothing but rage and a newborn baby. Remembered every door that had been slammed in her face. And then I'm going to offer to fix it, Lily said quietly. I'm going to save his project, prove I'm the only one who can, and make sure the board knows exactly who's responsible for the mess and who cleaned it up. She hung up and began preparing the most important presentation of her life. Not to win a contract. Not to prove she was good enough. To prove she was better than the man who'd tried to destroy her. And if everything went according to plan, she wouldn't just save the terminal expansion. She'd take everything Richard Hawthorne had built and make it hers. If you're invested in seeing how Lily's plan unfolds, make sure you're subscribed. Because the next phase of her revenge is about to shake Denver International to its core. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon in January, exactly 2 years and 3 months after Richard Hawthorne had fired Lily Morrison. Lily arrived at Denver International's executive building 30 minutes early, wearing a charcoal gray power suit that had cost her 3 months of careful saving. Maya was with a trusted babysitter, the first one Lily had felt comfortable hiring now that Morrison Consulting Group was generating real revenue. She carried a leather portfolio containing 147 pages of documentation. Every mistake, every code violation, every fraudulent budget report, every corner cut, every lie Richard had told to cover up the fact that he had no idea how to execute the project he'd stolen from her. Patricia Walsh, the board chair, met her in the lobby. She was a silver-haired woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and a reputation for suffering no fools. Ms. Morrison, thank you for coming on such short notice. Your preliminary audit was concerning. Concerning is one word for it, Lily said. Criminal negligence is another. Patricia's eyebrows rose. That's a serious accusation. I have serious evidence. They rode the elevator to the top floor in silence. As the doors opened, Lily saw Richard through the glass walls of the boardroom, pacing like a caged animal. David Chen sat at the conference table, nervously shuffling papers. Neither of them had any idea why they'd been summoned to an emergency meeting with the full board of directors. They definitely didn't know Lily was about to walk through that door. Patricia opened the boardroom door. Gentlemen, thank you for waiting. I've asked Ms. Morrison from Morrison Consulting Group to join us today. Richard's head snapped up. When he saw Lily, his face went through a remarkable transformation: confusion, recognition, and then pure rage. What the hell is she doing here? He pointed at Lily like she was something offensive he'd found on his shoe. Patricia, this woman is a disgruntled former employee. She has no business. Sit down, Richard. Patricia's voice could have frozen nitrogen. Miss Morrison is here because I hired her firm to conduct an independent audit of the terminal expansion project. An audit that has revealed extremely troubling findings. Richard's face drained of color. An audit? You went behind my back too. We went around a CEO whose project is 6 months behind schedule and $43 million over budget. Another board member interjected. Sit down. Richard sank into his chair. David looked like he might throw up. Lily walked to the head of the table, connected her laptop to the projection system, and pulled up her first slide. A photo of the terminal expansion's foundation, clearly showing structural deficiencies. 2 years ago, Lily began, her voice steady and professional. I designed a terminal expansion that would add 15 gates to Denver International Airport, generate $200 million in annual revenue, and position this airport as a premier hub for domestic and international travel. That design accounted for soil composition, wind load factors, seismic requirements, and long-term structural integrity. She clicked to the next slide. A comparison of her original designs versus what had actually been built. What's been constructed bears almost no resemblance to those plans. Load-bearing walls have been eliminated to save costs. Foundation depth has been reduced by 30%. Materials specified in my original design have been substituted with cheaper alternatives that don't meet Colorado building codes for commercial aviation facilities. That's a lie, Richard sputtered. Everything we've done has been approved by city inspectors. City inspectors who were paid $15,000 each to rush approvals without proper assessment. Lily clicked to another slide, showing bank records she'd obtained through a subpoena. I have documentation of wire transfers from an LLC registered to your brother-in-law to 3 different building inspectors. Would you like me to continue? The room went silent. Every board member was staring at Richard with expressions ranging from shock to fury. The foundation issues alone will require $60 million to remediate, Lily continued. The electrical systems are improperly installed and represent a significant fire hazard. The hack design can't support the passenger volume you've projected, which means the terminal will be uncomfortable and inefficient from day one. And the gate configuration you approved contradicts FAA regulations for minimum clearance between aircraft. She paused, letting that sink in. If this terminal opens as currently constructed, you're looking at lawsuits, FAA violations, potential casualties if there's a structural failure, and permanent damage to Denver International's reputation. The project isn't just over budget and behind schedule. It's dangerous. David Chen had gone pale as a ghost. We followed the approved plans. Richard said the modifications were necessary to control costs. Shut up, David. Richard's voice was venomous. The approved plans? Lily smiled coldly. You mean the plans that Richard submitted to the board? which were actually my original designs with his name on them? Or the plans he's actually been building from, which are so substandard they should never have been permitted? She clicked to a new slide. Side-by-side comparison of the plans submitted to the board versus the plans used for actual construction. This is fraud, Patricia said quietly. This is criminal fraud. Richard stood up so fast his chair toppled backward. You can't prove any of this. You're a bitter ex-employee making baseless accusations because I fired you for poor performance. Poor performance? Lily's laugh was sharp as broken glass. Let's talk about my performance, Richard. Let's talk about how I spent 7 years building programs that increased this airport's operational efficiency by 32%. Let's talk about how I designed the very project you're currently butchering. Let's talk about how you fired me when I was 6 months pregnant and told me, and I quote, "Black women don't belong in leadership positions." She pulled out her phone and tapped the screen. Richard's voice filled the boardroom crystal clear. Black women don't belong in leadership positions. You don't have what it takes. You never did. And deep down, you know I'm right. The recording continued, playing the entire conversation from that day 2 years ago. Richard's smug dismissal, his threats, his casual cruelty, every damning word. That's a legal recording, Richard shouted. Colorado is a 2-party consent state. Actually, Lily said calmly, your office has a sign posted by the door stating that conversations may be monitored for quality assurance. I checked. That's legally binding notice. And I was wearing a recorder that day because I knew something was wrong. I knew you were planning to fire me, and I wanted documentation. Richard looked around the table desperately, seeing nothing but disgust in every board member's face. You fired a pregnant employee for discriminatory reasons, Patricia said. You committed fraud in project execution. You bribed city officials. Richard, you've destroyed your career and exposed this airport to massive legal liability. I can fix this. Richard's voice cracked. Give me 6 months. I can bring the project back on track. With what expertise? Lily clicked to her final slide. Her original terminal design, flawless and comprehensive. You couldn't execute my design when you had all the resources in the world. What makes you think you can fix the disaster you've created? Richard turned to her, and for the first time, she saw genuine fear in his eyes. Lily, please. I made mistakes. I'm sorry. But if this gets out, if the FAA investigates, the whole airport suffers. Is that what you want? To hurt innocent people just to get revenge on me? Revenge? Lily closed her laptop. This isn't revenge, Richard. This is accountability. And no, I don't want the airport to suffer. Which is why I'm prepared to fix your mess. The room went quiet. Morrison Consulting Group can remediate the foundation issues, correct the code violations, and complete the terminal expansion according to the original design specifications. We can do it in 8 months for $75 million. That's half the time and half the cost of what it would take any other firm. Because I already know every detail of this project. I designed it. Patricia leaned forward. And in exchange? Richard Hawthorne's immediate termination as CEO. David Chen's termination as Director of Terminal Development. A public acknowledgement that the original design was mine. And a 10-year contract making Morrison Consulting Group the exclusive strategic development partner for Denver International Airport. Richard made it sound like a wounded animal. You can't, you're taking everything. I'm taking back what was always mine. Lily's voice was ice. The only difference is that now I don't have to work for someone who thinks my skin color and gender make me incompetent. The board will need to vote, Patricia said, but her expression made it clear which way that vote would go. Of course. Lily gathered her materials. I'll give you privacy to deliberate, but I should mention that I've already been approached by 3 other airport authorities who are interested in Morrison Consulting Group services. So if Denver International isn't interested, I have options. She walked toward the door, then paused, turning back to Richard. You told me I should focus on what I'm actually good at. You were right. Turns out I'm very good at building airports. I'm even better at building companies, and I'm exceptional at making sure arrogant men face consequences for their actions. Richard's hands were shaking. Tears were actually forming in his eyes. I have a mortgage.
I have expenses. What am I supposed to do?
Lily thought about standing in her foreclosed apartment with a newborn baby, wondering how she'd survive. Thought about living above a laundromat, eating ramen for dinner, watching her bank account drain while Richard gave magazine interviews about his visionary leadership. I don't know, Richard. Maybe you should focus on what you're actually good at. She paused.
Oh, wait, you're not actually good at anything, are you?
You just had money and connections and a willingness to steal other people's work. She left him sitting there, broken, while the board deliberated his fate. The vote was unanimous.
Richard was terminated immediately, escorted from the building by security while former employees watched in shock.
David Chen resigned before he could be fired, slinking away with whatever dignity he had left.
Morrison Consulting Group signed the contract that same week.
And 2 months later, when Lily walked onto the construction site of the terminal expansion she'd designed 3 years ago, wearing a hard hat with Project Director stenciled on it, she felt something she hadn't felt since before Maya was born. Not triumph. Not vindication. Peace. She was exactly where she was supposed to be. Doing exactly what she was meant to do, and nobody could ever take it away from her again. If this moment of justice feels as satisfying to you as it does to us, don't go anywhere. Because the final chapter of Lily's story proves that the best revenge truly is massive success. 2 years later, Lily stood on the observation deck of Terminal C at Denver International Airport, watching planes take off into a crystalline blue Colorado sky. Behind her, the terminal she designed her terminal, finally bearing her name on the dedication plaque, bustled with thousands of passengers, moving through gates that worked exactly as she'd envisioned them. The project had been completed 3 weeks ahead of schedule and $12 million under budget. Morrison Consulting Group had turned what Richard Hawthorne called impossible into inevitable.
Mommy, look! That plane has a rainbow on it.
Maya pressed her 4-year-old face against the glass, her breath fogging the window. She was wearing a little hard hat that matched Lily's, a gift from the construction crew who'd adopted her as their unofficial mascot during the build. That's a pride livery, baby. Some airlines paint their planes in special colors to celebrate different communities. Like how we're special because we're strong. Lily smiled, kneeling down to her daughter's level. Exactly like that, her phone buzzed.
A text from Marcus. City Council just announced you as Denver Business Leader of the Year. Congratulations. Told you they'd recognize genius eventually.
Morrison Consulting Group now employed 43 people across offices in Denver, Phoenix, and Seattle. They'd completed 9 major airport projects in 2 years, with another 12 in development. Lily had been featured in Forbes, Bloomberg, and Time magazine's list of most innovative entrepreneurs under 40. She'd given a TED Talk that had been viewed 3 million times, speaking about turning discrimination into determination, setbacks into comebacks. The terminal expansion generated $240 million in its first year of operation, exceeding even Lily's original projections. The board had offered her Richard's old position as CEO. She'd turned it down. She had no interest in managing airports anymore. She wanted to build them. Miss Morrison? A security guard approached, looking uncomfortable. There's someone here asking to see you. He says it's important. His name is Richard Hawthorne. Lily's stomach tightened. She hadn't seen Richard since the day he'd been escorted out of the building in disgrace. She'd heard through industry gossip that his reputation was destroyed, that no airport authority would touch him, that he'd burned through his savings trying to fight legal battles he couldn't win. Where is he? Lower level. Near the maintenance offices, of course. As far from the executive floors as possible. Lily took Maya's hand and rode the elevator down, her heart pounding despite herself.
What could Richard possibly want from her now? She found him standing near the janitorial supply closet, wearing a dark blue uniform with DIA Facility Services embroidered on the chest. He was thinner than she remembered, older, with gray streaking through his hair and deep lines around his eyes. He held a mop in one hand. For a moment, Lily thought she was hallucinating. Richard? He looked up, and she saw shame flood his face. Real shame. Not the performative kind he'd probably tried on judges and lawyers. Hello, Lily. His voice was hoarse. I know you probably don't want to see me, I just...
I wanted you to know that I work here now, in case you see me around. I didn't want it to be awkward. Lily stared at the mop in his hands, at the uniform, at the absolute reversal of fortune standing in front of her. You're a janitor? Here? At Denver International? Custodial services specialist, he corrected automatically, then laughed bitterly. Yeah, I'm a janitor.
It's the only job I could get after everything. The fraud charges, the discrimination lawsuit you filed, the criminal investigation. I lost everything.
My house, my savings, my reputation.
I was going to end up homeless, and then someone in HR here took pity on me.
They didn't know I used to be CEO.
I didn't tell them.
Maya tugged on Lily's hand. Mommy, who's that man?
Someone I used to work with, baby. Richard looked at Maya, and something crumbled in his expression. She's beautiful.
How old? 4. And thriving. Lily's voice was cold. What do you want, Richard? I wanted to apologize. He set the mop against the wall, his hands shaking. I know it doesn't mean anything.
I know sorry doesn't fix what I did to you, to your career, to your life, but I needed to say it anyway.
You were right. About everything.
I was arrogant, I was cruel, and I was so convinced I was better than you just because of
things that had nothing to do with competence or ability. He gestured toward the terminal above them, where passengers walked across floors Lily had designed.
This terminal is incredible.
It's everything you said it would be.
And watching it succeed, knowing I almost destroyed it because I was too stupid and too proud to admit you were smarter than me.
It's my own personal hell. He met her eyes.
I clean these floors at night, Lily. I mop the terminal you built. And every single night, I think about the day I fired you.
And I wish I could go back and do everything differently. Lily felt Maya squeeze her hand tighter, her daughter's intuitive sense that something serious was happening. Part of her wanted to laugh in his face.
Wanted to tell him he deserved this and worse.
Wanted to grind his nose in the cosmic justice of him literally cleaning up after the success she'd built from the ashes of his cruelty. But another part of her, the part that had been exhausted and broken and terrified 2 years ago, felt something unexpected. Not forgiveness. She'd never forgive what he did.
But she didn't feel the rage anymore either.
Richard, I'm not going to tell you it's okay because it's not. What you did to me was evil. You tried to destroy my career when I was at my most vulnerable. You stole my work. You called me incompetent because of my skin color and my gender. You made me believe I was worthless. Richard's eyes filled with tears.
But here's what you didn't understand then, and probably still don't understand now, Lily continued. You never had the power to make me worthless. You had the power to fire me, to make my life difficult, to steal credit for my work. But my value, my competence, my brilliance, that was never yours to take away. She gestured around them at the gleaming terminal, at the architecture that bore her stamp on every surface.
I built this, not you.
And I built it better than you ever could have, because I actually know what I'm doing.
You were always mediocre, Richard. You just had enough money and privilege that nobody called you on it until you stole from someone who was too competent to stay quiet. I know. His voice broke. I know that now. Good. Lily picked up Maya, settling her on her hip.
I hope you think about it every night while you're mopping these floors. I hope you remember that you could have been the CEO who championed the brilliant woman who designed this terminal.
Instead, you're the cautionary tale about what happens when ego matters more than excellence. She started to walk away, then stopped.
But Richard? I'm not going to have you fired.
You can keep your job.
You've clearly been humbled enough, and I'm not interested in kicking people when they're down.
That's your style, not mine. Richard's face crumpled completely. He sank against the wall, tears streaming down his face. Thank you.
God, Lily, thank you.
Don't thank me. Just do your job well.
These floors deserve to be cleaned by someone who understands their significance. She walked away, Maya's arms around her neck, and didn't look back. In the elevator, Maya asked, "Was that man mean to you, Mommy?"
Once upon a time, yes.
He was very mean. But you're not mean back?
Lily thought about that.
About the satisfaction she'd expected to feel seeing Richard brought so low.
about how the reality was more complicated than the fantasy had ever been. Being mean back would make me like him, Lily said carefully.
And I never want to be like people who use their power to hurt others.
I want to use my power to build things, to create opportunities, to prove that talent and hard work matter more than privilege and prejudice. The bestest builder in the whole world, Maya said with absolute certainty. Lily laughed, some of the tension leaving her shoulders.
I don't know about that, baby.
But I'm pretty good. That evening, Lily attended the dedication ceremony for Terminal C. The mayor gave a speech.
The governor cut a ribbon, and when it was Lily's turn to speak, she looked out at the crowd of city officials, business leaders and journalists, and told the truth. 3 years ago, I was fired from this airport while 6 months pregnant. I was told I didn't have what it took to lead. I was told that people like me didn't belong in positions of authority. I lost my job, my home, and my savings. I gave birth alone and raised my daughter in a studio apartment above a laundromat while building a consulting firm from absolutely nothing. The crowd had gone silent. I'm not telling you this for sympathy. I'm telling you because there are people watching this who are in that dark place right now. People who've been told they're not good enough, that they don't belong, that they should accept whatever scraps the world offers them and be grateful.
She looked directly into the camera broadcasting the event.
I'm here to tell you that the people who try to make you small are afraid of how big you can become. I'm here to tell you that when someone steals your work, your credit, your opportunity, the answer isn't to give up. The answer is to build something so undeniable that they can never erase your name from it.
Again, she gestured to the terminal behind her. This building exists because I refuse to accept someone else's assessment of my worth.
It exists because I chose to be excellent instead of bitter. And it exists because revenge isn't about destroying your enemies, it's about succeeding so completely that their opinions become irrelevant. The applause was thunderous. After the ceremony, Patricia Walsh pulled Lily aside. That was powerful. And I owe you an apology.
I was on the board when Richard fired you. I should have questioned it, should have investigated.
I failed you. You made it right, Lily said simply.
That's what matters. 6 months later, Morrison Consulting Group opened an aviation design school in partnership with 3 historically Black colleges and universities, offering full scholarships to students from underrepresented backgrounds. Lily taught a class every semester, sharing the lessons she'd learned the hard way. And late one night, working in her office while Maya slept in the attached childcare room Lily had built for working parents on her team, she got an email that made her pause. It was from David Chun. Subject: I'm sorry, Lily. I know you have no reason to read this,
and even less reason to care, but I need to say it anyway. What I did was unforgivable. I betrayed your mentorship, your trust, and your friendship because I wanted the promotion and the prestige more than I valued integrity. I've spent 2 years working as a junior analyst at a firm in Houston, and every single day I think about how I got there by stepping on someone who'd only ever helped me. Richard lost everything because he was cruel and criminal. I lost everything because I was a coward.
You don't owe me forgiveness.
I just wanted you to know that I see now what I couldn't see then. You were always the most talented person in that building. And the only reason Richard and I succeeded at all was because we were riding the coattails of your brilliance. I hope you and Maya are thriving. From what I've read, Morrison Consulting Group is changing the entire industry.
That doesn't surprise me at all.
Respectfully, David. Lily read the email twice, then closed her laptop without responding.
Some apologies didn't deserve acknowledgement. David would have to live with his choices just like Richard did. She walked into the childcare room and watched Maya sleep, her daughter's face peaceful and perfect in the dim light. 3 years ago, Lily had stood in Richard's office, pregnant and terrified, and heard him say that Black women didn't belong in leadership. Today, she ran a multi-million-dollar company, employed dozens of people, and had her name on one of the most successful airport terminals in the country.
The best revenge she'd learned wasn't making your enemies suffer. It was becoming so successful that their hatred became irrelevant.
Their obstacles became inconveniences, and their names became footnotes in your story of triumph. Richard Hawthorne had tried to erase Lily Morrison. Instead, he'd forged her into something unbreakable. And now, every night when he mopped the floors of the terminal she'd designed,
He had to live with the reality that he'd had greatness in his hands and thrown it away because he couldn't imagine that a black woman might be smarter than him. That was justice, not cruelty. Just the natural consequences of treating people like they're disposable, and then discovering that the person you discarded was the only one who actually knew what they were doing.
Lily kissed Maya's forehead and whispered, "We did it, baby girl."
We built something beautiful. And in the morning, she'd wake up and build something even bigger. Because that's what excellence does. It doesn't stop. It doesn't settle. It doesn't wait for permission from people who never deserved to grant it in the first place.
It just keeps building, keeps creating, keeps proving that talent, determination, and intelligence will always triumph over prejudice, privilege, and empty arrogance. Always.